and with all necessary planning and other consents in place, which are
questions understanding order 36 agus ríis we're daciacht amosha de hela Badger Lishri and Ta'am.
Gormaigad a hána sé tarig sul gnar da ha an Bank Hanis Europe a reti usurish margin fui Trí ceathu pointe céad gan election méad a dhéhhainte céad an ó bhí méúil an agus bei chunkar leichra ar seo ag teilí na bhfuil margus de rianathe acu le go leorig feice le go así hiaachta ag gairdú €1,000 a comparaid le túsa bíanana agus sílam cóilte an ammanas dearcú ríist ar faoisiú ús margaiste. Taoiseach, you know that workers and families are struggling, that prices are rising and they're spilling over into every part of household budgets. And the European Central Bank are expected today to again raise interest rates by another 3/4 of a percentage point. Now, that's a 2% increase since July of this year, and it will have an immediate impact on households with a tracker mortgage. Households in a tracker mortgage with an outstanding balance of €200,000 would see their annual payments increase by over €2,000 per year compared to the start of this year. For other mortgage holders, the decision now rests with their banks as to whether they will pass on these interest rate hikes onto the customers or whether they will absorb them. Our position in Sinn Féin is clear. Banks should absorb these interest rate hikes in the interest of their customers. They are in a good position to do so, to do the right thing. In the first half of this year, Bank of Ireland and AIB had combined profits of €950 million. They have increased their market share since. They've continued dividend payments to shareholders this year. And as the Central Bank made it clear in May of this year, profitability in the banking sector has recovered and is set to be bolstered as a result of rising interest rates. The Central Bank went further, noting that Irish banks were positioned to increase their profits more than other European banks as a result of rising interest rates. And according to the bank's own estimates, these interest rate hikes could bolster their interest income by over €1 billion each year. So let's be clear, interest rate hikes announced by the ECB provide a bonanza for Irish banks. The financial outlook and position of our banks is strong, while for households it's not. Those on variable rates are at the mercy of these banks and the decisions they make in the coming weeks and months. Their decisions could increase the mortgage repayments on households by thousands of euro. Households that are already struggling to make ends meet. Banks need to do the right thing. They need to not pass on these interest rate hikes, and they need to make that clear to their customers. Families have spent the past year looking at their household budgets. They're planning how best they can manage to get through the winter and into the coming year. But no household could have anticipated that the cost of their mortgage would increase by this much and by so quickly. So can I ask you, Taoiseach, will you join with me in calling on the banks to do the right thing and not pass on these interest rate hikes onto households that are already struggling under immense financial pressure? And secondly, Taoiseach, you know that those on tracker mortgages will automatically see these rate hikes passed on to them, just as the last two rate hikes were passed on to them since July. So, Taoiseach, these households can't be expected to shoulder an additional burden of more than €2,000 per year in additional mortgage costs without the state, without the government exploring every possible avenue to support them. So I'm asking you today, will you commit to examining options to introduce targeted, tailored and time-bound mortgage interest relief to those who are most heavily impacted as a result of interest rate hikes announced by the ECB?
Thanks, Deputy. I'm conscious of the fact that we haven't had any announcement yet from the ECB in relation to interest rates, but it is anticipated, or widely reported at least, that the ECB will raise interest rates by 0.75% today. I have to emphasise, as we all know in this House, that the European Central Bank is independent in its functions, doesn't take directions from this government or any government, and will make its decisions based on what it believes is the right thing to do for the economy in the round. I know that any increase in interest rates for mortgage holders is going to be very unwelcome. People who have tracker mortgages in particular will receive a third letter this year telling them that their monthly repayments are going up, and that is very much unwelcome for those of us who hold tracker mortgages. But the ECB's rationale, as you understand, will be that interest rates need to rise now in order to bring prices under control, in order to bring inflation down, and that will be to the benefit of everyone. Ultimately, it's the remit of the European Central Bank to ensure that we've price stability, that inflation is no higher than 2% per year, and one of the tools that they have is increasing interest rates. The other is quantitative tightening, and it would appear that the ECB intends to employ both of those. It is worth pointing out that we have had a prolonged period of very low interest rates for a long time now, and that is now ending. We're likely to see interest rates being closer to their long-term average in future. So, for example, as recently as 2014, not all that long ago, the average level of fixed interest rates for new lending was 4.1%. It's now 2.5%. So that just gives you an example of how low interest rates have gone. And this prolonged period of low interest rates isn't going to continue. We're going to see much more normal interest rates into the future. And I know that's not going to be welcome for a lot of people, but not telling people the truth shouldn't be welcome either. And I think it's important that we tell people the truth about these things. In terms of any decision on variable rates, those of course are commercial decisions for the banks involved. I agree that banks shouldn't be using rising interest rates as an opportunity to make excessive profits. I absolutely agree with you on that, but they do need to take other factors into play as well. For example, new mortgages. We want banks to offer new mortgages to first-time buyers. We want to offer those new mortgages at competitive rates. We want banks to offer long-term rates. And of course, for a lot of older people who perhaps have some small savings, they'll be looking for an increase in their deposit rate. So the banks have to take all of that into account. You can't just focus on one group. That wouldn't be fair. But I do agree with you that banks certainly shouldn't use this as an opportunity to make excessive profits.
And all those excessive profits that the banks are making obviously don't go untaxed under your government. Taoiseach, the banks have told us, the banks are saying themselves, despite making nearly €1 billion in the first 6 months of this year, that this will boost their interest income by another €1 billion. The Central Bank have told us that Irish banks will benefit most of all European banks. These banks will benefit most as a result of the hikes. It's not just about making excess profits. They need to do the right thing. We're in an almighty cost of living crisis, and the banks should do the right thing. Some banks have not passed on these interest rate hikes, the first two. They need to do the same in terms of the third, and I make that call on behalf of Sinn Féin to the banks today. But with the government also, as you've recognised, there's an automatic increase for tracker mortgage customers. There has been mortgage interest relief in the past. It has been targeted, it was tailored, it was time-bound. It is now, is it not, do you not believe it is now time to introduce a similar measure to deal with the shock? And this is a shock to many tracker mortgage customers that will see interest rate payments increase by €2,000. And as you know, the Central Bank have done 3 interest rate hikes. They have signalled that they could do as much as 5, and there is expectation that there will be one early in the new year again. So, Minister, can I ask you, will you consider options to look at mortgage interest relief in a tailored, time-bound fashion that is targeted at those who are most under pressure as a result of these moves?
Thanks, Deputy. I'd love to bring back mortgage interest relief for people who have tracker mortgages. I would benefit from it myself, by the way, as would a huge number of my constituents in Dublin 15. But I can't make those kind of promises. We had mortgage interest relief in the past when interest rates were much higher than they are now. And we now have a prolonged period of very low interest rates coming to an end. And we're seeing interest rates go back to something that would have been considered much more normal 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. And it seems to me that you've learned nothing from what's happened across the water, Deputy Doherty. You spent the last few months calling for a mini budget. After that, you called for a limitless energy price cap. And we see how that has turned out in the United Kingdom. And now you have another set of populist promises to make to take advantage of people who have tracker mortgages. Like, when are you going to learn from what's happened across the water? Quite the contrary, Deputy. What the UK has done across the water, which they're now reversing, is exactly what Sinn Féin proposed. And now you have another populist promise that you want to calm people with. I used to think it would take 2 years for Sinn Féin to wreck our economy. I think it would take only one budget. One budget by Quasi-Doherty would do all the damage.
Thank you. The cogency of the argument is not strengthened by just ignoring the chairperson. Okay, there's a time limit to make your argument.